All right, welcome into Mississippi State Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. Andrew Miller here on a Thursday evening. Happy NFL draft first round night, however we want to say that. You know, I said earlier in the week we might change the schedule, and I just didn't plan. I do a bad job of planning things out, and I know a lot of people are going to be watching the NFL draft, which means a lot of people are not going to be watching this. But, hey, if you're tuning in, we certainly do appreciate it, and we can – react live to some of the picks as they happen. I've got the draft going on my phone next to me, so I can watch that. And hopefully, if we're still on here when the Saints go, I don't have to have a meltdown over what the Saints do. I'm hoping the Saints do not trade up. That has been a rumor that is out there nationally. The Saints are looking to get up to pick number 3, and I think that would be a massive mistake for my New Orleans Saints. But we'll see if they do a move that makes me hate them tonight, or if any of your teams do a move that make you hate them. It is a call-in show, opportunity for you guys to come be a part of the stream. I didn't really broadcast much on this, or advertise, I guess I should say. I also forgot to put a call in for questions because I know we've started doing Thursday nights as an opportunity to leave questions. But to be honest, we haven't been getting a lot of responses on that, which is fine. I get it. But I forgot to ask. So we'll still take questions in the future, or we might just make it one of those things like, hey, Thursday nights, if you have anything you want to have answered, send it in, which we can that's every show, to be completely honest. Anytime you guys have a question you want answered here on the show, just send it in, and we can see if it's something that will work into this conversation, or if it's something we want to hit as a bigger topic, moving forward for another episode. I would certainly, if you guys have episode ideas, topics that you want to have discussed regarding Bulldog sports, regarding college football, or the SEC, whatever it may be, let me know, because we're getting into the off season for football very soon, and obviously off season content we can drum up plenty of preview type stuff, but ultimately, in order to do 2 shows a week, we got to have plenty of stuff we can get into. And I don't want to just run through all the, naming old players. We'll definitely do some of that, or just reliving whatever. We'll find anything interesting. So again, if you guys have any sort of topics that you are interested in having discussed here on the show, I'm all for it. I would love to hear. I want to grow this thing as much as possible, and taking listener suggestions is a big part of that. So if you guys have stuff that you would like to see on the show, things you would like to see changed, topics you want discussed, let me know. But again, it is a call-in show, so for those of you who are listening, if you want to come be a part of the discussion, we have a link to join the stream pinned to the top of the live chat, also there in the description to the video. Just click that link, and we'll bring you aboard, and we can, again, talk about whatever involving MSU sports. But for those of you who are tuning in, again, thank you. If you could, leave us a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and have those notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. And, of course, tell all the Bulldog friends and family you have in your life about what we're doing here at Mississippi State Live. And if they're wondering when they can catch the show, let them know that you can catch Mississippi State Live Mondays at 6 p.m. Central Time and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central Time right here on the Mississippi State at the Voice of College Football YouTube channel. And if you cannot catch the show live, you're having to listen after the fact, we are available wherever you get your podcast from. Apparently, Apple's still not a thing. I just checked on that again, and I need to get that figured out, because for whatever reason we still haven't gotten a show posted on Apple, at least not one that comes up easily when you search for it on Apple Podcasts. So apologies for that if you've been an Apple listener trying to find the show. I thought that had been updated, and we need to still get that corrected, but I'll reach out to the proper people to get that handled. Yeah, there's a lot of news, honestly, and we're not going to go super long. I say that, I'm sure, knowing me, I've already rambled more than I would have expected. God, we're 5 minutes into this, and I'm still doing the intro to the show. But, even obviously it's a call-in show. If at any point any of you want to come be a part of the action, by all means. But we do have some different topics we'll get into. I'm going to talk a lot about Brenen Thompson and kind of when we could see him go in the draft. Probably not tonight, but it is a possibility once we get to tomorrow that we see Brenen Thompson hear his name called to be the first Bulldog receiver drafted in the last 30 years. So we'll talk a little bit about that and kind of where he's fallen on the big boards, why he is where he is, some of the differing opinions that are out there, and then kind of try to look at where teams, what teams make sense for him. It could kind of tough to project, but we'll talk a lot about Brenen. I figured that was a relevant thing with the draft ongoing as we speak, as the Raiders are about to make their first overall pick. Baseball, LSU comes to town. Huge series for the Bulldogs to continue fully riding the ship. Obviously, a lot of momentum coming off the sweep at South Carolina. They need to keep that rolling if you're talking about being a team that's going to host in the postseason, and especially if you're talking about a team that still wants a shot at being a top 8 national seed. This is a must-win series for Mississippi State. It's probably a must-win regardless, I just think from a momentum standpoint. But we'll talk a little bit about the Bulldogs versus the Tigers on the diamond. And then a couple newsy things that we'll hit right off here at the jump. And to start off, let's go with the news items. And today, Steve Robertson of the 247 Sports Genes Page team put out the report. Former Mississippi State offensive line coach Mason Miller is rejoining the Bulldog staff as an offensive line consultant under Jeff Lebby and working with Phil Lodeholt. Miller was the O-line coach for the Bulldogs from 2020 through 2022 with Mike Leach. He had been Leach's O-line coach at Washington State. Was a guy who came up in the air raid. I believe played at Valdosta State within the offense, coached at Valdosta State because Valdosta has pretty frequently over the years continued the air raid tradition or versions of it. And obviously, I think he worked with Mummy at a few stops, Hal Mummy, and had done a really nice job working under Mike Leach as an offensive line coach. Developed a lot of really strong picks during their time, a lot of strong players during the time at Washington State. Had a first-round draft pick with the Cougars. I am blanking on his name right now, but they developed one first-round lineman there and developed another first-round lineman at Mississippi State with Charles Cross, and a coach that pretty continually got the most out of his offensive lines and just got units that played well, a very good developer of players, and pretty consistently put a solid offensive line out there on the field. You look during his time at Mississippi State, that offensive line got better year after year after year. I remember 2022, not having Charles Cross left tackle was a bit of a question for them at times that year. I think it was Dollar Bill Johnson who was mostly in there, but the overall offensive line took another step forward in year 3. So you saw that group continue to improve under his watch. It was the same thing at Washington State. It was not retained by Zach Arnett when Arnett made the decision to make the shift in schematic philosophy on the offensive side of the ball as the head coach. So once Leach passed, he had to go find another opportunity. Was the offensive line coach at, I think, Tarleton State, one of those Texas FCS schools, then got hired at Baylor and did a really nice job. I think the numbers have been like they went from 3.5 yards per carry to 4.9 in his 1 year. They got better in pass protection. And have done a really, really good job improving that Baylor offensive line back in 2024 rather. And was, on staff again with the Bears this past season until October. It was announced that by head coach Dave Aranda, he was leaving the team for personal reasons. Not stated exactly what that was, what the situation may be, but Mason Miller did not finish the season with Baylor this past year. But, now is joining Mississippi State. We're coming back to the Bulldogs now as a consultant for the offensive line. It's a move that I like a lot. I think very highly of Mason Miller as a coach. I just look, hey, I'm an air raid guy at heart, right? I'm going to remain biased to the air raid guys. But frankly, of all those Leach assistants, I think Mason Miller has been the most impressive when you look at what he has done throughout his career. He's just consistently put out good offensive lines. He has been a very good developer of talent. He's done a good job of maximizing his groups and getting them to perform well. He's primarily been an air raid type guy throughout his career, but these last few stops at Tarleton State and then Baylor, running offenses that are adjacent in some ways. The OC at Baylor, Jake Spavital, is off the air raid tree with Dana Holgerson. The version that he runs, though, in a lot of ways, takes a lot of elements from the Briles system and some of the stuff that they do in the passing game and some of the stuff that they do in the run game, in the RPO game especially, which certainly applies back to the offensive line. So he's got some experience in a world running an offense similar to what you're getting with Jeff Levy. I think certainly having a guy that knows a thing or two about pass protection is pretty important to have, given State's struggles protecting the quarterback over these past couple of years. But I also think you can give them value in their ability in the run game as well. I think Mason Miller is a very, very good coach. Now, as a consultant, officially won't be able to have an impact on the recruiting trail. And I don't think that's the end of the world. I still think Phil Loadholt overall, good reputation as a recruiter. He needs to win some battles this year for sure, but recruiting has sort of been considered the strong suit with Loadholt as a coach. It's been the on-field production that's sort of been the questionable part, and you're hoping Miller can help with that. He's not going to have a role here, but I mean, I don't even know how much you can judge Miller as a recruiter, because we look at his time at Mississippi State and, in hindsight, a lot of the guys that he brought in, save for Albert Reese and Cannon Boone, who are have been starters now in recent years, a lot of the offensive linemen that Mason Miller recruited to Mississippi State ended up not working out for Mississippi State. Guys that had to transfer out, a lot of them going to lower levels. But I have a hard time judging those guys when they were recruited to be in the air raid, and none of them got to play in the air raid, ultimately. I would take his overall body of work and the groups that he's put together during his time at Washington State, and the fact that he continually develops State's offensive line is a very good sign of what he can do. But again, he's not going to be a recruiter in this role anyway. But look, someone that I think it's a really good hire. Frankly, a guy that, I'll just be honest, I think higher of him as an offensive line coach than I do of Phil Loadholt, just being blunt, based on what we've seen him do to this point in his career. So I love the move. I think it's just a really nice, beneficial addition to the coaching staff. And ideally, it's going to help out your offensive line one way or the other. Having another voice in the room that we know is a really talented coach is a good move for them. Micah Sutton checking in. Thompson going mid-second to early third round. Possibly. We'll talk more on that later. That is a possibility. But we're definitely going to get big into the Brenen Thompson talk this evening. Thanks for tuning in, Micah. Certainly do appreciate that. The other news over on the basketball side, Bulldogs have picked up a couple of commitments in the last few days. Kendall Sanders as a forward out of Utah, who will be a sophomore, and then a senior guard in Tawan TJ Simpkins from Seton Hall. Couple interesting additions. When you talk about Sanders, this is a guy that you're looking at it from an upside standpoint. 6'8", 230, was a true freshman this past year with the Utes. And from what I've read, a situation where he was not expected to be a contributor. It kind of in some ways similar to what you saw with Jamarian Davis-Fleming from Mississippi State. Was not supposed to play much of a role for Utah as a true freshman, but there was an injury to one of their top bigs, and it forced him onto the floor. And he showed flashes. Averaged, coming off the bench, 5.2 points a game, 3.1 boards, while shooting 44%, which, for a big, 44% is not the best, but he's a little bit more of a stretch to floor type player. He shot 40% from three. And, this is a guy that my understanding is, did, actually attempt quite a few 3-point shots over the course of the season. Yeah, game after game, he was attempting shots from distance. So you're not like talking about a guy where he's a center, but he took 5 threes over the course of the season and made 2 of them. Officially on the year, what is the total for him? David Bailey goes off the board. Interesting. That was kind of expected. Average 2.5 3-point attempts per game. So a guy who plays a little bit of that stretch 4-5 type role could play either spot. You could go to some smaller sets where you have him in there as your center. Would probably be playing him mostly at the 4, would be my guess. Had some solid performances over the course of the year. Had 8 and 5 on a 60% shooting day against Colorado. Didn't have double figures, I don't think. He did once against Eastern Washington. Put up 13 points in that game. 9 points and 8 rebounds, and a win over Ole Miss on the year. 9 points and 7 rebounds to open up the season against San Jose State. Just trying to find some of the better games overall in the year. Just a solid player, but a kid who showed some flashes, some athleticism to his game. Again, has some nice shooting ability for a guy at the size, which State fans have been saying, hey, can we get a guy who can play a little bit more of a stretch forward type role for State? We'll see if that's what he can bring in. We've had guys like that before step in and then didn't end up contributing in that manner once they come to Mississippi State for whatever reason. But it's an upside addition, and you're hoping that this is a guy that continues to take another step forward. It could be a really good player. And I think the people around Utah felt that was kind of what you were going to get out of him. Tawan Simpkins out of Seton Hall, 6'4", 190 guard. Past year was a junior. I believe began in June. My understanding is he started off in junior college, spent the 24-25 season at Elon, where he averaged 14.5 points a game, 14.6 points a game, 3.8 rebounds, 2.9 assists, 1.6 steals, shot about 41% from the floor, 26% from three. Shooting numbers are definitely not a strong suit. Did get to the free throw line a lot that season at Elon. Goes up to Seton Hall this past year and was the third leading scorer coming off the bench for the Pirates. 9.7 points a game, 2.8 boards, 1.2 assists, averaged just over 1 steal per game. Shooting percentage not super high, only 40% overall from the floor, but 37% from three, and took about 3 threes a game. It was solid at the free throw line and the opportunities he had there. So, shooting numbers overall, you want to see that improvement, but he's a solid shooter from three. What I have heard, and look, this is going off of, I haven't had an opportunity to sit down and watch a lot of Seton Hall. A lot of people have said, though, that he's been a good defender and that he can add something to that. And I think that's a big thing. State needs somebody in that backcourt that you can trust as a plus defender. Obviously, Hubbard is there to score, right? RJ Johnson, don't really know what you're getting there as a defender, but I think that's more of another scoring threat. You need somebody that you can trust can play in that backcourt and give you some good defense. And it kind of sounds like TJ Simpkins, Tawan Simpkins could be a guy that gives you a little bit of that, but had some big scoring games as well. Obviously, the shooting numbers don't blow you away, but he had 27 points in a win over Xavier. Had a huge day. 22 points against Providence, 17 points against Georgetown. Now, I will say down the stretch of the season, had some struggles. And that was sort of one of the takeaways is he did fade sort of as the year went along. But I know Seton Hall was not happy to see him go. If you go back and you look at the announcements that he ultimately entered the portal, Seton Hall apparently has lost several players that they were kind of felt were good contributors, that they could have a good nucleus to build around for this coming year. And just the way things go for a lot of programs these days, all of those guys have hit the portal, and TJ Simpkins is a part of that. Don't know if this is a guy that's coming in to be a starter for you, but a guy that would definitely be a part of your rotation. And if what has been said about him as a plus defender is true, fills a role that you need on the defense. I think these are solid additions for State. These are guys that you would expect to play roles, right? In the case of Kendall Sanders, if what we've talked about is like, hey, he showed flashes as a true freshman, takes another step forward, and has some really high athletic upside, has some shooting ability at the four, maybe that's a guy who could be a starter for you this next season. And again, I think Simpkins is probably a part of your rotation. I think these are two guys who will contribute for Mississippi State next season. And I think RJ Johnson obviously will be a contributor, probably going to be a starter. And it is worth noting, another 6'4" guard coming in alongside RJ Johnson. They are adding more length to that backcourt to have there with Hubbard as well. Still want to see a couple surefire impact guys. Not to say that either of these players or RJ Johnson, for that matter, couldn't be impact players. I'm sure they absolutely could. But I think it would be big for Mississippi State and big in terms of creating that optimism going into a pivotal year, as I have talked extensively about over these last couple of live streams. You need to go all in, and you need to see State go out and win some big battles. You still need to find a guy that I think you would feel confident can be your dude at center. I think you still need to find somebody who you can trust can play the wing at a high level. kind of a 3-and-D type guy. I would look for another guy at the 4, frankly, even if it's more of a defense-first type guy. Maybe Sanders is more of your offensive threat there. Can you find a guy that you put in to play some more defense there? They have several spots that still need to get filled. And not to say that you can't go out and get these guys where you're looking at upside and you're projecting and put it together for them to be big-time contributors. But I still think getting some surefire, proven production is something that this team likely needs. So that's going to be the big thing to watch, again, over these next couple of weeks. Can you go out and bring some guys in that you trust are some really, really high-level players to make a big-time impact? But a respectable start to the portal, want to see it ramp up a little bit more. Take a minute to tell you guys about the fantastic merchandise we have over at thevoiceofcollegefootball.com. The hats, the shirts. Here's that heavyweight tee that's got that maroon color you all love. Polos, sweatshirts, drinkware, and we have a lot of different teams represented. No Mississippi State, but a lot of the SEC. So if you're looking for the perfect gift to find a friend or family member in your life who's a fan of one of these other programs out here, programs from all across the country represented, by the way, while also repping the VOCFB brand. Go check out our merch there. A lot of great stuff that we have available. Get this back. All right. Jeremiah Love off the board. Okay, it's an interesting move for the Cardinals. Love is awesome. And I honestly, I don't hate the idea of teams saying, look, let's get a big-time playmaker on the roster. Their offensive line is also god-awful. And, look, you're hoping this isn't going to be an Ashton Genty 2.0 situation where it's a great running back who gets into a bad situation and doesn't get to produce because of it. But, Jeremiah Love is an awesome player. I mean, I don't think I wanted the Saints to take him at 8 just because the Saints have so many other needs to fill, but also wouldn't have hated it, especially after the Saints brought in Travis Achane. It's Achane now, yeah. And with they Devin Neal drafted last season. I think that it's probably about it for Alvin Kamara. I don't even know if he's going to be on the team next year, but I know I'm just talking about the Saints here. But that said, Jeremiah Love would have been an impact player that, if you'd put him on the Saints, I think he could have been utilized right away. But the Saints have some other needs, and I think if they get filled, they'll be all right. We're through 3 picks. We'll see how that continues to go. But speaking of the NFL draft, let's talk about Brenen Thompson, Bulldogs wide receiver. And we already had the prediction from Micah Sudduth here earlier. Thompson going to go mid-second round to early third round. Brenen Thompson, we know, is where he's going to hear his name called. And he is going to be the first Bulldog receiver drafted in 30 years. It has not happened since Eric Moulds was taken in the first round of the 1996 NFL draft. And, hey, Eric Moulds put together one incredible career. So if you're going to have one receiver to hang your hat on in NFL history, Eric Moulds is certainly there. I know State's had some other guys back in the day. But, Eric Moulds is up there. But you've done nothing since. And you've had a lot of solid receivers come through the programs over the years. You've had some guys that you thought could have had opportunities. You've had guys that got chances in the NFL and just couldn't stick. And along comes Brenen Thompson, who obviously put together a massive year, led the SEC in receiving with 1,054 yards, 6 touchdowns, averaged 18.5 yards per catch, was towards the top of the nation in explosive plays. The number of his receptions that went for 40 or 50-plus yards was way up there. Was just a big-time player for the Bulldogs within Jeff Levy's offense. And had the type of year that, look, we've seen receivers produce before, right? And we've seen receivers produce in Levy's offense and it not mean anything going forward in terms of their NFL draft hopes. But, Thompson was someone that we started to see it back last December. So, people started saying, no, this kid's got some NFL opportunities. And I know there was talk about trying to bring him back to school for another year, but the NFL definitely is interested in him. And we sort of people started to put on the film and see this kid and like, holy crap, the speed that he has. Like this is different. And, puts on a show at the combine with a 4.26 to lead all 40-yard dash participants and run the fastest time out there. And immediately everyone's like, all right, this kid's got a chance to be special. And I feel like the range of opinions on Thompson have been all over the place. I would say it's been pretty quiet since, to be honest. There's not been as much buzz around him lately. Where is he going to end up? Where's he going to be drafted? And it's interesting because I kind of said there's a wide range of opinions. You see some guys that love him. I think like CBS Sports, one of their guys has him as a top 50 prospect in the class, and as a top 10 receiver in the class. I've seen some that have him as high as number 6, or the number that comes after 6, because I'm not going to say that, within the receiver rankings. Then you have some that have him as like a fringe top 150 player and have him as like a receiver number 20. There's just a really wide range of opinions on him. And whereas you have some guys that could say, as Micah Sutton was saying, mid-round 2, this guy could be off the board. And then you have others saying that, it might not be till like early 5th round that we see him get taken. There's a wide range of where Brenen Thompson could fall. I'm leaning towards I think it'll go earlier because I even though it's gotten quiet, I kind of feel like we're going to hear his name called earlier than maybe some people are expecting because of the big trait that he has to offer. But it's interesting the number of prospects there's just such a wide range of outcomes of what we could say about him and where he could ultimately land. And I was putting some of the notes on like, why are people so all over the place in terms of their opinion of him as a prospect. And I put together some notes. And this is not, some of this is, hey, the stuff that I know from watching him. Some of this is stuff that I've heard from watching other breakdowns, reading other breakdowns from a scouting standpoint. What do people have to say about Brenen Thompson? So for those who love him, like why would you be high on Brenen Thompson? Well, right away, I mean, it's the elite speed, right? That's number one. Everybody knows that. This guy is an absolute burner, and it's not a case of, well, he can run fast, but it doesn't translate to the field, or, yeah, he's a really fast player, but it's not a guy who's just always going to be running past corners. No, like he's a 4.26. It's a legit 4.26. Potentially could run faster than that. And you put him out there against a corner who is plenty fast in his own right. He's running right by him. It translates to the field. So immediately, like that speed is an asset. And then you add on top of that, like the ability to go get the football as a ball tracker. Now, there are mixed reports on this. This is where I say people are over the board. Some people feel it is a strength, his ball tracking and his ability to be over the shoulder, going down to the ground to get a ball. And I personally would put him in that camp. Others have looked at a few plays. He had just a couple drops over the course of the season, not a bunch. A couple drops on a few balls that were not perfectly placed, and then people started questioning the ball tracking. I think the ball tracking is a strength personally. So you give me a guy who runs as fast as he does that is going to go and get under the football and find a way to come down with it. With one caveat, as I'll talk about later. That alone is why some are really high on him, and that's why he's going to be drafted. Having the ability to stretch the field and having that threat on the field is always going to be valuable to an NFL offense, especially when we talk about an era of the sport where defenses are so obsessed with this idea of it's all about preventing the explosive play. Having a guy that can create explosives is all the more valuable. And having a guy that, because of his ability to create explosives, can create space for everybody else is all the more valuable. You can play too high with Brenen Thompson on the field. It does not matter. Everybody's like, too high coverage is ruining the NFL. Yeah, you have to have a safety over Brenen Thompson. Well, guess what? One, he could probably run by that safety too, because I saw Brenen Thompson beat too high coverage plenty at Mississippi State, which, by the way, the fact he does this while being able to play outside with his frame, you can play too high, but when you're talking about an outside receiver, like it's tough for a safety to stop those guys. if you got a guy who can consistently win one-on-one down the field. But let's say you do get a safety over him. Guess what? You just left a void in the field, in the middle of the field or in like one quarter of the field for somebody else to come open. So there's going to be massive, massive value. Like that's why he will be taken. Somebody's going to look at that and say, I got to have that on my roster just because of what it's going to – it gives me the ability to be a strike-fast offense. It gives me the ability to open up space for everyone else because I've got a guy like that on the field. It's too valuable to not have. There's the instant acceleration. It's not like he needs a guy. He needs a bunch of time. Like it's one step and he's gone, and he's able to burn past you, and he can use that to beat man coverage and get past it. And it gives you that ability that when he's in the open field or you give him just a little bit of a crease, he's running away. So you can use that down the field where he's not going to get run down from behind from a corner when he makes a big catch. He's also not going to be a guy that he's also a guy that if you get him the ball, on a swing pass or an end around, if you got enough, if he's got space, he's going to hit the hole and get upfield, and you're not catching him. For a guy who is seen as a deep threat, I think he runs pretty crisp routes. Like his breaks are good, and you see some moves there to get open that are really nice. He doesn't have a lot of reps doing this because of what he was asked to do in the offense, but he's comfortable making catches over the middle of the field. I think he's willing and able to make those catches. He's a willing blocker at his size. It's not going to be a strength for him when you're 5'9", 164, but he's willing to go in and do that, play that role. And then obviously you add in the proven production within the SEC. Like people can roll their eyes about, the SEC and whatever, at this point, but being the leading receiver in the conference and seeing some of the corners that he was going up against, and every single week he's running wide freaking open. And people are like, yeah, he could have led the country in receiving with better quarterback play. Yes. That counts for something. So you see elite speed, you see proven production, even if it's just the 1 year. The doing it from playing on the outside and all these other intangibles that come into it. It's like, yeah, that's a guy where if you love Brenen Thompson, that's everything you're looking for. And that's where if you're talking about taking him as a top 50 pick in the NFL draft, or top 60 pick, that's what you're going to. Now, why are there those who rate him so much lower? Well, the size is the biggest thing, which I guess is kind of an oxymoron the way you would say that. The size is the biggest thing. 5'9", 164, just a lot of those guys, it's tough. Especially when you talk about a receiver who primarily, like you see him being an outside threat. And which you could play him in the slot too. But the size will always be a concern for people because of how that impacts everything else. And that kind of gets into like the contested catches. This is what I said, like there was a caveat a second ago. He's great at tracking the football in the open field, in my opinion. Like I said, some have a different opinion on that. Some think he's just okay at it. I think it's a strength for his. But if the ball is underthrown and it's the corner has an opportunity to make a play, those were situations where we didn't see the catch converted because he couldn't really fight through the contact there. He's not a guy who's going to be able to go up for the football. And when you're a deep threat, that's where the size, you want a bigger frame receiver because it's harder to hit a small target from 50 yards away. So when you got a guy with a bigger frame, it's a little bit more valuable in that matter. That's one of the concerns people have. And also being able to beat man coverage. I think you can beat press man, but a lot of times I got to be able to run, like it's one quick move and then I'm running by him. If he gets contact, he gets hit on the route, sometimes that's tough to recover from. So because it all comes back to the size. So that's a concern for teams. Like that already kind of puts him as an outlier. Something with him, and this I've seen this debated. But there's been some talk about, the stop-start ability. And even though, like, one of these guys, some of these guys that have the speed that he does, and I'm checking right now, somebody made a trade, and I'm hoping it was not the Saints who made the trade. Please let it not be the Saints who made a trade. But okay. sometimes it can be tough for him to like throttle down quickly and get back. He's not bad at it, but the stop-start ability is something that has kind of been talked about. And for a guy who is as athletic as he is and as fast as he is, navigating traffic is not something he's necessarily done a ton of. If you remember last year, when he would get opportunities on like a short throw, there were not many cases of Brenen Thompson taking a quick throw and turning it into a big long game. There were a couple that, like the play against Missouri, but that was one where he had a seam and he was able to hit it and get upfield. You kind of want to see sometimes with these guys who are like these shiftier players is you want to see them. So I'm trying to watch this draft and Rack 2's got Arvell Reese off the board. Okay. You want to see them be able to – you're trying to find as many ways possible for them to be able to impact the game. So you start talking about these guys who are these speedsters, and that's where a player like a Zach Branch comes up, where Zach Branch has a ton of speed. Not much of a deep threat, but you know that you can get him involved like the screen game, the sweep game, and he's someone who can kind of – in the return game, and he can create on his own. And that's one of the questions with Brenen Thompson. I think part of the reason you didn't see – he didn't get thrown a ton of screens at Mississippi State. They didn't get him a ton of jet sweeps. They didn't use him as a returner much. And I think a lot of that comes down to if you give him a crease, like he's going to run right by everybody. If it's I got to make a bunch of guys miss, that's not necessarily like his biggest strength. Open field, you're not catching him. And if you try to tackle him one-on-one in the open field, yeah, that's where he's going to make you miss because you're just not going to be able – he's just going to put one cut and be gone. The stop-start, the quick agility, that's something that's I would say is not like a huge strength for him. So that kind of limits his role a little bit in how you use him in the offense. You would still throw him screens. You would still Kansas City trading up. Interesting. You would still get him involved with screens and with end arounds and sweeps. You can still use him in that way. And as long as you've got like I said, if you've got a crease, he's going to make you pay. You can use him over the middle of the field in the short, quick throws and try to get a shallow cross, turn it into a big game. You can definitely do all that with him. And I think he has a good understanding of finding space as a route runner. But it is, once the ball's in your hand, the stop-start ability. I've rambled on this a bit because, one, I'm trying to watch what's happening with the draft at the same time while explaining this. That's just not the biggest strength for him. You know, some have brought up the injury history thing. Yeah, I don't really worry too much about that. I know he's been banged up a couple times in his career, but it's been a few years since that was a thing for him. Now, I mean, the last big part of it, though, is a schematic thing. And look, hey, the reality is, like, this is a system that has not produced a lot of NFL receivers. So there's going to be some questions there. But also because of what he was asked to do within the scheme, there are questions for people. Brenen Thompson almost exclusively lined up outside on the right and was running goes, post, or comebacks. That was like 80% of what he did. I said earlier, I think he's capable of, catching the football over the middle of the field. He didn't run a lot of routes over the middle of the field. They didn't really use him on a lot of crossing patterns. They didn't use him on a lot of out-breaking routes. They didn't use him in a lot of quick game type routes. They did some, but not a lot. It was almost exclusively either we're throwing it to you deep or we're getting you on a comeback at like 10 yards down the field. That's what this offense is. That fits his skill set perfectly. Yeah, you're going to maximize that. This is not a criticism of Mississippi State and Jeff Levy. You got to do what is going to put your players in the best position to succeed in college so that your offense can succeed so you can win football games. When you were projecting to the next level in the NFL, though, they want to know how many different ways can we use you. And I think there's a lot of NFL teams that are probably just wondering, and a lot of scouts for that matter, all right, like, I think he might be able to do these things. I think he has some traits that are translatable. We don't have a lot of examples of him doing it on tape. So that's where, like, why is there such a wide range of opinions on Brenen Thompson as a prospect? That's why. Some people, it's as simple as, hey, man, dude's fast as crap, goes up and gets the football. That is super valuable for an offense. And, we can find a way to utilize that. And I think he's got enough route running prowess. We can't ask him to do more. Let's put him in an offense. He's going to be an instant impact. I think other people look at him and say, yeah, he's a valuable asset, but do we want to take him with a top 100 pick when we're talking about guys that we're trying to fill these needs of players who are going to step in and we expect them to be starters for us. We expect them to play major roles. Not that Brenen Thompson couldn't get to that point, but from what we have seen of him, we don't know he can play that type of stuff. So, and by the way, I'm super high on Brenen Thompson. I would love to see him go early. I'm not saying any of this stuff to tell you that I think Brenen Thompson's not a good prospect or anything. Certainly not coming on the Mississippi State show and doing that. I'm explaining. I think you could see this go a number of different ways. If you told me he goes mid-second round tomorrow, absolutely could buy it. If you told me he didn't go till the 5th round, I think that's late. I was like, I feel like you're taking a lot of players ahead of him that he shouldn't. But I would also be like, okay, well, I mean, look, there were questions about him as a prospect that some had. Again, I think he should go a little bit earlier than that, personally. But I understand some of the questions. Where do we think he ultimately lands? I mean, I think I'm going to say it's tomorrow. I think he gets taken tomorrow. I'm going to say 3rd round, probably between the mid and late 3rd round, we see him go. So I won't say, Micah Sudduth had mid-second, early 3rd. I'm thinking mid to late 3rd, but I think somebody's going to take him. I think somebody's going to look at the skill set. I think you're probably talking about a team that is just kind of looking for that final piece for their receiving core, just another piece to fill in. I'll be honest, I don't know if all these teams have a pick or not, so bear with me. But I think a team like the Bills could use someone who could be more of a true deep threat down the field for them. I think the Patriots could find a use for that. The Jets could potentially find a little bit of a use for that. Not that you want them to go there, but the Ravens, I think, kind of fit that mold. The Steelers have come up a lot as a team. People talk about the Chiefs. Would you be bringing him in to essentially replace Xavier Worthy? I don't know. The Chargers have come up a lot as a possibility there. I could see the Giants wanting somebody to be more of that explosive threat. They kind of – Jalen Hyatt has not worked out for them the way they wanted to as a guy that kind of played in this offense, although it was used a little bit differently than Brenen was. But could you see the Giants say, hey, we want kind of another piece to be able to go downfield? Look, hey, Jackson Dart throws the football well down the field. I think that's certainly a possibility. So, yeah, there's a wide range of teams you can go to. I think you're looking for a team that's just trying to find that field stretcher. If it's a team that's looking for a number 1 receiver, I don't think it's them. If it's a team looking for a number 2 receiver, maybe. It's a kind of a maybe. But I think someone who wants that field stretcher type role in the offense, the Saints, honestly, I would prefer they go receiver a little bit earlier personally. But I think the Saints, honestly, if you give them the role that they had Rashid Shaheed, which is kind of what you would get with Brenen Thompson, that's a big fill for them. So I'm saying he goes tomorrow night sometime in the 3rd round, mid to late 3rd. Could be a little bit later possibly, but I think we'll see him go day 2 would be my prediction as it stands right now. Let's talk briefly here about Bulldog baseball, and that's how we'll close out tonight. Mississippi State gets LSU coming to Starkville. Massive series for State. Obviously, it's always massive whenever State and LSU meet up on the diamond. But this is a big one for the Bulldogs to continue some momentum, which it feels like they've got a little bit. They've won, 5 in a row now? It was UAB, the sweep of South Carolina, and then they get the win over Memphis in the midweek. They need another series win. And I'll be honest, if you're talking about wanting to really get rolling again, I won't say you need a sweep over LSU, but a sweep over LSU, I think would kind of be that thing that would make you say, all right, this team's fully back. And this is an LSU team that is certainly gettable. The Tigers have not been great this season. 24-18 overall. They're 6-12 in the SEC. They've just lost to a lot of teams that they have 4 quad 4 losses, a quad 3 loss. And they've just been unimpressive. Since the start of SEC play, you've seen a team that's just not looked all that good, just to be quite honest. And they're coming off back-to-back sweeps where they've been giving up a bunch of runs, and haven't necessarily done much on the offensive end either. It's been a lot of games that have not been that competitive. LSU just has not looked good. And for that reason, Mississippi State needs to take advantage of them in Starkville. You have to do that. Talking a little bit about the Tigers, at the plate, kind of hit and miss. They're a middle-of-the-pack team. They're batting .280 on the year. They do a solid job getting on base. Their team on-base percentage of .401. They've walked 230 times, which is towards the top of the SEC. So they do a good job of getting on base, and then they kind of use the long ball to bring them home. You look up and down the lineup, guys with 5+ home runs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players in their lineup that have 5 or more home runs, 2 with double figures, Cade, Aaron Beide, and then Stephen Milam as with 11 and 16. Oh, sorry, no. Jake Brown has 16 home runs. I was looking at the wrong thing there. They're an okay team batting-wise. Lately, the bats have not been there. But they can certainly – look, if you let them get on base, that's kind of the thing. If you give up free passes to LSU, they have enough pop in the lineup to make you pay. I wouldn't say they're a team that just is completely reliant on it, but it's a big part of what they do offensively. They're sort of up and down there. Pitching staff is where they've been in trouble. On the year, they have a 5.08 team ERA, one of the bottom in the SEC. You look at their rotation for this weekend, and they are throwing out TBA for Game 3, but Kason Evans, 5.47 ERA on Friday, and then on Saturday, William Schmidt with a 4.14 ERA. It's interesting. If you talk about LSU, they get a ton of strikeouts. Batters don't really light them up. On the year, opponent batting average allowed is .227. They don't give up a ton of big hits. I mean, they're kind of average in those numbers. It's not like they're great one way or the other, but they get a ton of Ks. And then teams just are kind of average hitting against them, both just in terms of getting hits and then getting hits for power. It's free passes. They have issued a ton of walks. LSU on the season has walked 198 batters. Then you add in 63 wild pitches, 54 hit by pitch. Now, the hit by pitch numbers have not been as high in SEC play in terms of those free passes allowed, but the walks and the wild pitches are still there. So it's one of those deals of if they're getting strikeouts, they're fine. But they've given up so many free passes, and then the wild pitches just allow runners to get in scoring position that then just average batting performances against them come back to bite them. We've seen that with Mississippi State before, with Mississippi State baseball previously. It's one of those deals where if you just give them a bunch of free passes, it's going to come back to bite you, and you're going to be in trouble. Even if you're not necessarily a team that teams hit super well against you, if you're giving a bunch of free passes, that'll kill you. And Mississippi State's obviously a team that, in theory, should be able to take advantage of that. And look, when I look at what State needs to do this weekend, I think the big thing for them is at the plate is patience. LSU is a team that will give you free passes. That it's both it's patience and also make sure you don't do anything stupid to get State's had issues with the base running this year. When you have an event, the opportunity to take advantage, you need to take advantage. But be patient at the plate. LSU is a high strikeout team, and that's sort of how they're going to thrive as a pitching staff. Don't swing and miss at junk. Clearly, they throw a bunch of junk with the walks. Get guys on base, and then just have your normal approach. And I think you're going to be able to be successful there. And as for the pitching staff, it's kind of the opposite. Just don't give the free passes, which State's been pretty good about that this year. I think if you don't let LSU just get guys on base, you're probably going to be fine. I think the walks and the wild pitches have been an issue for State this year. The walks, they've kind of toned that down. Whoever's more disciplined with that, I think, is coming away with the series this weekend. To me, that's what ultimately decides this thing. But look, it's a series State needs. You want to talk about the path for Mississippi State to be a team that's going to host this year. 16 SEC wins for State is probably the magic number, especially because you don't have any bad losses. We'll see if anything happens the rest of the way, but perfect in quads 3 and 4. Actually, perfect against quad 2. All of Mississippi State's losses have come in quad 1. If you're Mississippi State and you get to 16 SEC wins, you're probably hosting. So how do you get to 16 SEC wins? Obviously, you would start off by saying we'll take 2 from LSU. And then between Texas, Auburn, and Texas A&M, you have to get 4 more games because you have 10 SEC wins. Can you take 1 at Texas? Can you take 1 at Texas A&M? Can you get a series win at home against Auburn? I mean, that's the most obvious answer right there. If you do that, if you win your remaining home series and don't get swept on the road the rest of the way, you're a host team. You also want a little bit more, though. You would love to be a team that ultimately can be a top 8 national seed, which I think you got to get to 17 SEC wins for that. How do you do that? Either you got to get a sweep somewhere the rest of the way and then do everything else I said, or you got to take a series. You would have to win 3 of the last 4 series if you're not going to have any sweeps. If you won the series against LSU, won the series against Auburn, and then between Texas A&M took a series against one of those teams, all right, now I would say you're a team that is a top 8 national seed. That's a tough path, though, which is why I say your best case scenario in terms of feeling you're back on track to host for sure and be in position to be a top 8 national seed, get a sweep this weekend. If you can get a sweep over the Tigers this weekend, from just a win standpoint, you're at 13 SEC wins. If you're at 13 SEC wins, you don't even have to win an SEC series the rest of the way to host. Now, I think that would be tough to host, losing 3 straight SEC series to close out the year. And I think that would mean State would have lost 6 of their SEC series total on the season. But if you can get a sweep, you're in a position where, all right, now we get any series win the rest of the way, you feel almost guaranteed about being a top 8 national seed. So the stakes are high for Mississippi State. The stakes are absolutely high the rest of the way. We know it's tough against LSU. I'm sure LSU will find a way to wake up and play their best baseball of the year because they always seem to do that. But this is a big series opportunity for Mississippi State. Back in Starkville after a little bit of a reset, we'll see if the issues they had against Georgia and Tennessee are behind them. And if whatever pressure there was from playing at home, hopefully that's gone. But if you can handle business and get a series win, you're in solid shape. If you get a sweep, I think you're back to being in the conversation for being in a really, really good place the rest of the year. So we'll see how that goes. That'll do it for me this evening. About to find out who the New Orleans Saints are going to draft, so we'll see how that works out for my team. Hopefully we hear Brenen Thompson's name called earlier than any of us are expecting, and we'll be able to react to that. So be back on Monday. We'll talk about wherever Brenen goes. We'll talk about Bulldog baseball against LSU, how that series plays out for them, and any other news that there is. We'll certainly hit on that, and I'm sure we'll have some sort of a football topic to get into as well. Thanks to everybody for listening. If you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel. Have those notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. And as always, swing your sword. Hail State.
Hey, y'all. This is Grant Sashery of LSU at the Voice of College Football Network. I'm here today to announce that the Voice of College Football Network now has its official website. It's been uploaded so you can look at all the latest news and content from the Voice of College Football Network. You can also look at different forums, channels, shows, and it has to show all the show schedules right here and the host. Make sure to check out the Voice of College Football's new website at vocfb.com. Once again, vocfb.com.